On March 11, 2025, approximately 10 sheriffs from throughout Colorado attended the House Judiciary hearing on Senate Bill 25-003. The sheriffs were met with hostility from both the bill's sponsors and members of the Judiciary Committee. During the session, Representatives Chad Clifford and Jennifer Bacon openly mocked and loudly laughed at a sheriff as he worked to formulate an answer to a question from Representative Clifford. Democrat House Speaker pro tempore Andrew Bose Necker even mocked the status of sheriffs as elected representatives of their counties.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I've heard from our sheriffs is that they view themselves as the protector of Second Amendment rights on behalf of their constituents, as you've heard today.
Representative Jennifer Bacon also called into question the integrity of the sheriffs who testified before the committee.
I'm curious if we might be able to continue to have conversations on that, only in the sense that just want to figure out how, like, where that discretionary line may land with sheriffs. I want to believe they're all good guys, but maybe they just don't like somebody.
Despite the hostility, the sheriffs stood their ground and represented their constituents. Teller County Sheriff Jason Mikesell's testimony.
I'm Sheriff Jason Mikesell with the Teller County Sheriff's Office. I'm speaking on behalf of my citizens throughout my county. I want to talk to you about a story. 10 dead, 15 hospitalized. Canada, a mass stabbing. Mardi Gras, New Orleans, F-150, white in color. Both of those committed mass killings inside the United States and outside the United States internationals. We talk about international, but we don't talk about the fact that those internationals are using other things than guns. Mental health is the largest issue for any of these types of mass killings, not firearms. Here's the other side I'd like to talk to you about and ask you. This bill is for public safety enhancement. How many public safety members are in front of you right now yelling they want this bill to be in place? You have members of the Sheriff's Association saying it's a bad bill, police chiefs that don't want this bill. Where's your law enforcement or public safety that are actually here today saying, this is a great bill, we want this? Here's the other issue, District of Columbia. They had a 182% increase since they formulated this type of bill into production there. They have one of the highest amounts of murders in the United States for their area after this type of bill was established. So I ask you, what really are you attempting to fix with this bill? What we see is the fact that this is going to now establish criminals and people with mental health issues, because that's your true issue. Not one mass killing has ever been conducted where somebody wasn't doing it criminally or they're having a mental health issue. Nowhere inside the United States, and somebody could vote, and I love it. But again, public safety is sitting in front of you telling you that we don't want your help, we want you to listen. Listen to us for the first time in my career coming up here talking about gun bills, to tell us why we need this. Because we're telling you we don't. Thank you for your time.
While high school students were testifying in support of SB 25-003, Committee Chair Javier Mabry belittled the New Orleans truck victims and the victims of the Canadian mass stabbings mentioned by Sheriff Mikesell to downplay their importance.
The first question I want to ask is, we often hear in these debates, well, in France they have mass stabbing events. You know, we'll hear a cherry-picked example of somebody maybe committing an event of mass violence with a truck.
He goes on to show his willful ignorance of the worldwide school violence epidemic, again in an attempt to discredit Sheriff Mikesell.
Does anybody want to speak to, is there any research on it? Instances of mass violence that are systematic in schools anywhere else in the world?
He doesn't know or doesn't care that the first Thursday of every November has been identified by UNESCO as the International Day Against Violence and Bullying at school. He is also ignoring the accounts of those in the armed forces who have seen the violence perpetrated by the Taliban against schoolgirls, using their bare hands and weapons like knives. Those girls are worth considering too, even if Representative Mabry doesn't think so. Earlier, we talked about how House Speaker pro tempore Andrew Bose Necker mocked sheriffs for representing their counties. Here is the remainder of his remarks in which he, through his legislation, retaliates against the sheriffs for disagreeing with him.
We met with the sheriff several times. We actually shared L44 with my ask is that by taking the sheriffs out of the bill, they would move to neutral. They informed us that they would still oppose, as you saw this evening. And so as a result, we felt comfortable staying with the original approach that they had already seen in the Senate version of the bill. What I've heard from our sheriffs is that they view themselves as the protector of Second Amendment rights on behalf of their constituents, as you've heard today. Unfortunately, I think they also have constituents who would agree with this policy. And so at the end of the day, we trust that our sheriffs will follow the rule of law, as you heard many say.
So, what Representative Bosnecker just said was that because the sheriffs wouldn't be bribed to compromise their commitment to the rights of the people they represent, he is retaliating by making them absorb the costs and labor associated with the bill, penalizing that very integrity. And he will gladly force the county sheriffs to be bludgeons against those very people whose rights they are trying to protect. During this hearing, representatives like Javier Mabry, Jennifer Bacon, Chad Clifford, and their apparent leader, Speaker Pro Tempore Andrew Bosnecker, demonstrated they hold sheriffs and their integrity towards their communities as contemptuous. They discounted the deaths of the victims killed in New Orleans and Canada. They sought to punish those who would stand up for constitutional rights. They acted with a detestable lack of decorum. This was all so they could ignore the will and rights of the people they represent and follow party lines. The House Judiciary Committee voted to pass Senate Bill 25-003. One last thing. To fund this bill, Representative Bosnecker and his people are playing a shell game with federal funds intended for Colorado parks and wildlife. A federal audit could cost our state hundreds of millions of dollars. With a mismanaged state budget already over $1 billion in debt, we cannot be this irresponsible. Find your representative at leg.colorado.gov/find-my-legislator and email them to tell them this bill must not pass the House floor. And email Governor Polis at governorpolis@state.co.us and demand he not sign this bill if it arrives at his desk. And as always, with you, we are Colorado.